Hi Reddit, I'm Amara, 32F, and I'm still trying to process how everything unfolded over the past several months. It feels like something out of a movie, but I promise this story is very real. Family drama, bitterness disguised as politeness, and a betrayal that initially left me stunned, but eventually gave me a clarity I didn't know I needed. I want to tell this carefully because it didn't happen all at once. The way my family treated me wasn't a sudden blow. It was a slow leak, a quiet, unraveling masked by smiles and justifications. The kind that makes you question yourself until one day it becomes too obvious to ignore. Here's some background. I come from a very tight-knit but extremely image-conscious family. We're not rich by any means, but we've always presented ourselves like a small dynasty. My grandparents had 4 children: my mom, her 2 brothers, and my Aunt Denise, the youngest and the loudest. Growing up, family gatherings were mandatory. Photo albums were curated, like museum exhibits. Stepping out of line even slightly meant whispered comments and subtle exclusions. I was the only daughter of the eldest sibling, my mom, and I always felt a strange kind of spotlight on me. My cousin Celeste, 28F, was Aunt Denise's only daughter. From as early as I can remember, everything became a competition between us. It was never our doing. In fact, Celeste and I were close when we were younger: sleepovers, handmade birthday cards, dressing up as twins even though we looked nothing alike. But adults love comparisons: who spoke first, who read better, who wore it better, and Aunt Denise made it her personal mission to ensure Celeste always came out on top. At every family gathering, she'd say things like, "Celeste got an A again. She's always been the responsible one," while glancing at me. Or, "Amara is very creative," which sounds nice, but Celeste is practical. You need practicality in life. These remarks were always delivered with a tight smile, wrapped in a tone of maternal concern. As a child, I didn't fully grasp the intent, but the feeling stayed with me. Things really shifted in college. I studied abroad in Italy for a year, something I had dreamed of since high school. I was proud of it, the first in our family to study internationally. I still remember emailing everyone photos of the countryside, updates, pictures of my campus. Only one person replied: my grandmother. My mom said everyone was just too busy, but I later found out from my cousin Levy that Aunt Denise had once said, "She's off trying to make herself look better than the rest of us again." Typical. Still, I tried to keep the peace. I came home for holidays, brought thoughtful gifts, complimented everyone on their achievements. I learned how to make myself smaller just enough to fit into the version of me they were comfortable with. Celeste and I stayed in touch, though more distantly. She went into finance, while I pursued design and eventually started my own business. Hers was seen as the stable path. Mine, a hobby waiting to fail. Never mind that my business eventually succeeded and paid for the down payment on my apartment. Then came the engagement. Celeste got engaged last year to a man named Gareth. He's the type who sounds like he's in a job interview at all times, every sentence polished, every smile calculated. I didn't like him much, but I kept that to myself. My mom mentioned the engagement casually, saying they were planning a huge wedding in the spring. I was genuinely happy for her. Despite everything, I thought maybe this could be a chance to reconnect. I even reached out to Celeste. I sent her a handwritten note, handwritten, congratulating her and offering help with design for invitations or decor. She didn't reply. I assumed she was busy. Wedding planning is chaotic after all, so I waited. Weeks passed. Nothing. My mom assured me I was definitely invited and told me not to overthink it. Then one evening in late March, my phone buzzed. A friend from high school tagged me in a Facebook photo with the caption, "The most beautiful bridal shower ever." I clicked on it. There they were: Celeste, my other cousins, even distant relatives from another state, all gathered in a garden filled with roses, blush-toned tablecloths, champagne glasses, gift baskets, the works. Everyone was there except me. I stared at that photo longer than I'd like to admit, not because I was sad, but because something finally clicked. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was intentional. Still, I didn't want to assume, so I asked. I called my mom. "Did I miss an invite to the shower?" Silence. Then she sighed. "Oh, honey, Denise thought it might be better to keep it small." Small. There were 27 people tagged in that photo. I said, "Mom, can you just tell me the truth?" Another pause. She said it would be less stressful for everyone if I wasn't involved. She thinks you bring unnecessary attention to yourself. I laughed. I didn't even mean to. It just slipped out. Unnecessary attention? Me? I hadn't even spoken to most of the family in months. I'd been quietly working, minding my own business. But somehow, my mere existence was disruptive. So I called Aunt Denise calmly. "Hi, Aunt Denise. I noticed I wasn't at the shower and just wanted to ask, am I invited to the wedding?" Her voice didn't waver for a second. "Amara, it's best if you stay away. You always have a way of making things about yourself. And Celeste deserves a day." That's just hers. No emotion, no apology, just cold dismissal. I said nothing for a moment. Then I laughed softly and replied, "All right, hope it's worth it." I hung up, and in that moment something inside me shifted, not out of anger, but out of peace. I realized I didn't need them, not anymore. That's when the idea began to form slowly at first, like fog lifting. A quiet, bold thought that maybe, just maybe, I didn't need to attend their celebration because I could create my own. And 6 weeks later I did. My phone stayed silent for days after that call with Aunt Denise. You'd think there'd be some hint of concern, some message trying to smooth things over, but nothing came. No follow-up. No one reached out to ask if I was okay or why I hadn't shown up to anything. They had decided I was a problem, and once someone becomes a problem in my family, they quietly erase you and carry on. I didn't tell my mom how deeply that conversation had affected me. She had a habit of defending. Denise, always with the same line, she means well. She just doesn't know how to express it. But at what point does intention stop mattering? I wasn't a child anymore. I didn't need my feelings translated, explained, or justified on someone else's behalf. That week, I removed myself from the family group chat. No drama, just a quiet exit. No one said anything about it, not even a text. Just silence. And in that silence, something unexpected began to grow. Freedom. I threw myself into work. I met with clients, finalized branding projects, and kept my mind occupied. But Illa noticed. She always did. We were having tea on my balcony when she said it, her eyes narrowing in that way she had when she read me like a book. "They hurt you again, didn't they?" I sighed. "It's fine. It's not fine, Amara," she said, her voice firmer. "You bend over backwards for these people, and they treat you like background scenery that they forgot to move off stage. Enough is enough." I didn't respond right. Away. I was used to people telling me to let things go, to take the high road, to be the bigger person. But Illa wasn't saying that. She was saying the opposite, and it left me stunned into silence. Then she leaned back and smiled. "You need an escape, Barcelona. Come with me. I'm going for a wedding shoot next month. We can stay a week, just us. No expectations, no family, no Denise." I hesitated. But then something strange happened. I said yes, just like that. I hadn't said yes to anything in a long time that wasn't out of obligation. I had no idea that one decision would change everything. The flight to Barcelona was the first time I'd felt real excitement in months. I watched the clouds outside the window, headphones in, fingers tapping against the armrest. The air felt different the moment we landed, and not just literally. It felt like I'd stepped into a version of life where I was allowed to take up space. Illa's wedding shoot was scheduled for the weekend, so we had 2 days to explore. On the first evening, we ended up at a small cafe on a side street near the Gothic Quarter. That's where I met Matteo. He wasn't what I expected, kind without being overbearing, sharp-witted but soft-spoken, with a calm energy that settled around him like warm light. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't trying to impress. He just listened. He asked questions. And when I told him why I'd flown across the ocean with my best friend on a whim, he didn't pity me. He just nodded and said, "Sounds like you needed to breathe." That first night we just talked, and I laughed more than I had in months. The next few days felt like something out of a dream. Matteo took us to places tourists never find: rooftop gardens with hidden gardens, tiny bookshops tucked behind courtyards, a bakery that made the best pistachio croissants I've ever tasted. He seemed to know everyone, not in a showy way, but because he genuinely paid attention to people. I watched him joke with an elderly shopkeeper, help a little boy, who dropped his soccer ball in the street, and speak gently to a nervous street performer trying out a new song. He was real, and I had spent so long surrounded by people who cared only about appearances that it almost felt unreal. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was honest, and I needed that more than anything. Illa was the one who nudged the next chapter forward. We were sitting at breakfast on the third morning, sunlight spilling across the table, when she said casually, "You know, I was thinking you never had your moment. You always made room for everyone else's celebrations. You planned birthdays, hosted baby showers, even helped decorate for Celeste's graduation dinner. Remember that? The one you weren't even thanked for?" I nodded. "Yeah, I remember," she smiled. "What if we made our own?" I raised an eyebrow. "Our own what?" Illa leaned forward, eyes sparkling. "Our own celebration. A day for you. Not to get revenge, not to prove anything. Just to claim your joy. Something no one can take credit for or twist. Something that's about you and only you." I laughed, not because it sounded ridiculous, but because, for the first time, I actually wanted it. I looked at Matteo, who was sitting quietly beside us, sipping his espresso. He smiled at me. "I know a place," he said. The venue was tucked away on a hillside overlooking the CA former artist's retreat, now used for small events and weddings. It wasn't large. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect, covered in climbing ivy with hand-carved wooden doors and a terrace that overlooked the ocean as if it had been waiting just for us. That's when the idea became real. Illa took charge, of course she did. She coordinated with the venue, spoke to local vendors, and called in a few favors from her photography friends. I didn't tell anyone. Not a single person, not even my mom. Not because I wanted to be secretive, but because I didn't want anyone to ruin it. It was just us, a small group of people who knew me, valued me, and wanted to see me happy. And somewhere along the way, Matteo and I fell in love. It wasn't planned. None of it was. But something about being in that space, surrounded by laughter and light, allowed everything to fall into place. I looked at him one evening as the sun set over the water, and I realized I didn't want to leave him behind. And to my surprise, he felt the same. So Illa said the words that set everything in motion. "If you two want to get married here, I'll make it happen." We did. It was quiet, it was sincere, and it was exactly what I needed. Now here's the part where everything changed. We didn't post about it right away. Illa took her time editing the photos, and I didn't mention it online. I was just quietly happy until Celeste's wedding day. That morning, Illa tagged me in a photo. Just one. It was a picture of Matteo and me standing beneath an arch of wildflowers, sunlight behind us, both of us laughing. Not posed, not forced, just joy. She captioned, "The most beautiful wedding I've ever had the honor of shooting. Congratulations, Amara and Matteo. You two are magic." I didn't think much of it, but apparently the rest of the internet did. The photo was picked up by a travel blog Illa had worked with before, then reshared by a wedding trends account. The post gained traction, thousands of likes, hundreds of shares. Suddenly, people were tagging me, messaging me, asking where the venue was, who designed my dress, whether we had a video. That would have been fine, except it all happened to go viral on the exact same day Celeste was walking down the aisle. And some of our mutual acquaintances started talking. One of them even commented publicly, "Wait, didn't her family just throw a huge wedding and not invite her? Yikes." And that's when the messages started pouring in. But it wasn't from Celeste. It was from Aunt Denise. Her message was short. "What is this? You didn't tell anyone you were getting married? How dare you try to upstage your cousin?" This was her day. No congratulations, no curiosity, just fury. She wasn't angry that I got married. She was angry that I hadn't asked permission. I didn't respond to her message, not right away. For the first time in my life, I let her sit in silence. I reread her words more times than I'd like to admit. Not because they hurt, but because they confirmed everything I had always quietly suspected. Her first reaction to my wedding wasn't joy, curiosity, or even mild surprise. It was outrage. Not because she missed the moment, but because she wasn't in control of it. I could almost hear her voice in my head, the clipped tone she used when she felt things slipping out of her hands. "How dare you do something without consulting the family, without me? And that, right there, was the crack in the foundation I had been waiting for. A few hours after her message, my cousin Levi sent me a photo. It was taken at Celeste's wedding reception. The lighting was dim, chandeliers blurred in the background, and right at the center was Aunt Denise slumped over in a chair, one hand on her chest, surrounded by concerned guests. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. The caption read, "Your wedding photos were showing up on every phone at the table. I think Aunt Denise fainted." I didn't reply to that either, but I smiled. Now, let me be clear, I didn't plan the timing of the post. Ela had tagged me early that morning because she thought the photos were ready, beautiful, and worth sharing. She didn't even know Celeste's exact wedding date, and neither did I, because I wasn't invited. But the universe has a sense of humor, and apparently, so does karma. Within 24 hours, my inbox was flooded. Some messages were kind friends, old classmates, college acquaintances saying how beautiful the wedding looked, how happy I seemed. But others were less generous. Some of my own family members, people who hadn't spoken to me in months or even years, suddenly remembered my number. My Aunt Lucia, Denise's older sister, sent me a voice message I'll never forget. She began with a cold sigh, then said, "You've caused quite a stir. Was that really necessary, Amara, to post something like that today of all days? Do you know how hard Celeste worked for this wedding? She was in tears when she saw what you did." What I did? They acted like I had stolen her bouquet mid-ceremony or walked down the aisle in a white dress before her. I still didn't respond. But Illa, ever perceptive, pulled her chair next to mine later that night and said, "They're spiraling, aren't they?" I nodded more than I expected to. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "You know, if they think that one photo ruined their event, they haven't seen anything yet." That got my attention. "Dear," I said slowly. "What do you mean?" She tilted her head and smiled. "Do you remember that branding project we did last year for that European wedding magazine? The one with the outdoor features section?" I nodded. "Well," she said, her smile widening, "they've been asking me for another exclusive and they want your wedding." I blinked. "They want to feature it?" She nodded. And I already said yes. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want this to turn into a tit-for-tat. But Illa stopped me. "You didn't plan to upstage anyone. You didn't manipulate or sabotage their wedding. But you did something beautiful, something real. Why should you hide it just because they think they own joy in the family?" She was right. I had spent too long making myself smaller to make room for others. This wasn't revenge, not yet. It was reclamation. And that's when the real shift began. The article dropped a week later. A full spread, 12 glossy pages of sun-drenched moments. Interviews with Illa and me, quotes about love found unexpectedly, and a short feature on my design work. It was picked up by 2 more digital platforms within 3 days. Suddenly, emails started pouring in from small venues, photographers, potential clients. My website traffic doubled. My social media following tripled. But it wasn't just about business. For once, people were seeing me. Not the version Aunt Denise had always painted. Not the caricature of an attention seeker. Not the misunderstood relative who needed to be excluded for the sake of peace. This was my story. And my family hated it. 3 days after the article was published, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked tired and endless. Way she clutched her purse made me brace myself. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded. "Of course." She sat at the edge of my couch like she wasn't sure she belonged there. Then she said it. "Celeste is devastated. She thinks you've ruined her memory of the wedding." I stayed quiet. "She's convinced people will remember your wedding more than hers." Still, I said nothing. My mom looked at me, then really looked at me, and for the first time, I think she realized something had changed. Something had shifted. She said she saw guests on their phones looking at your photo. Right after the cake, Denise was furious. "They say you did this to spite them." I met her gaze, calm, steady. "I got married 6 weeks ago, Mom. I didn't post it. I didn't tell anyone. I had my own life moment. They're the ones who turned it into a competition." She didn't respond. I don't think she had a counter-argument, not a real one. Then she said something softer, almost pleading. "Can you just take the article down? Maybe ask them to remove it?" I stared at her. She wasn't asking me to protect my cousin. She was asking me to dim myself again for their comfort. I stood up. "No, Mom. I won't. I didn't ask them to leave me out of the wedding. I didn't create this rift. But I'm not going to keep apologizing for being visible. She looked like she might argue, but then she simply nodded slowly and left. That could have been the end of it, but Aunt Denise wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Not an email. Not a text. A physical letter on monogram stationery, of course. It was 4 pages long, filled with flowery language, yet every sentence dripped with passive aggression. She called my wedding a sideshow, said I had weaponized timing, and accused me of flaunting happiness to provoke pain. But one line stood out, the one that still sits in my drawer. You've embarrassed this family more than you realize. You've damaged Celeste's future by overshadowing her start. Don't expect forgiveness. Forgiveness. She spoke of forgiveness as if it were hers to grant. That letter didn't break me. It sharpened me. I was done asking for a seat at their table. So I built my own, and then I sent out invitations. I planned an event, not a wedding, but a private gathering, an exhibition, a design showcase, a celebration of my work and my life, hosted in collaboration with the same publication that had featured my wedding. There would be media coverage, editors, clients, friends, family. At least, not officially. The event took place on a crisp autumn afternoon just outside the city, at a restored estate known for hosting curated art and design showcases. Ivy-covered columns, arched glass doors, and open-air courtyards lined with soft white lights. Illa helped me coordinate everything.